They praise your calm while you swallow the cost. That is the trap. You think you are being mature, flexible, hard to provoke. They are learning something colder. They are learning how much discomfort you will swallow before you call a thing by its real name. By the end of this, you will be able to recognize the people who turn your patience into usable space. It rarely begins with an open insult. It begins with a delay that lands on your body before it lands in language. A time gets shifted after you were already moving. A favor becomes larger after you already agreed. A plan changes in the doorway, and you feel that tiny inner recoil, then bury it because the amount seems too small to justify a reaction. That is how the measurement starts. Not with a wound, with a minor overrun. You smooth your face, your voice stays even, and they quietly mark you as someone who can be leaned on without immediate cost. The dangerous part is not the single overrun. It is the lesson it teaches the other person. You absorbed the friction, so the friction did not disappear. It moved. It moved from their behavior into your nervous system. You see this in the small social moments people love to call harmless. Someone says they are 5 minutes away when they have not left. You are outside in the cold, checking your screen, telling yourself not to be dramatic. Someone asks for a little help, then adds 3 more moving parts after you say yes, and your chest tightens because the real request only appeared after your consent was already spent. Somebody keeps talking over the edge of your no with warm language, and you start answering the tone instead of the action. None of this looks severe enough to prosecute in public. That is why it works in private. The body feels the theft before the mind grants itself permission to name it. People who run this pattern are not always loud. Some of them are charming. Some of them sound rushed, fragile, scattered, grateful. Some of them even admire your steadiness while they use it. The praise is part of the harvest. You are so easy. You are so grounded. You are the one who never makes things difficult. Listen carefully to that kind of sentence. It often means your discomfort has become invisible because you keep carrying it silently. A person learns your tolerance by giving you small chances to defend it. When you do not, the boundary is not respected. It is resized. That is why the early scene matters so much. You are at a table, the food cools, and the message arrives after the agreed time with a smiling apology and a new estimate. Nothing dramatic happens. You tell yourself it is fine. You even add soft language to protect the moment. No problem, take your time. But your fork stays in your hand longer than it should. Your appetite thins. Your body has already understood that your time was treated as a flexible surface. What they hear is simpler. Delay accepted, cost absorbed elsewhere. The next move is almost always a little bolder. They ask with the assumption already built in. They send the larger request as though the yes is still active. They arrive with the expectation that you will adapt because you adapted last time. What looks like confidence is often borrowed certainty. They are standing on the memory of your last accommodation. This is how tolerance turns into permission, not because they misunderstood you once, but because your silence kept getting converted into precedent. You can hear the shift in their phrasing. The request becomes an update. The apology becomes a brief decorative line attached to the same behavior. The gratitude shrinks because the access feels normal now. Your labor, your waiting, your rerouting, your emotional self-management start being treated as part of the environment, like light or water or a chair already in the room. The more calmly you absorb, the less visible the absorption looks. Then the psychological damage begins to split in 2 directions at once. Outwardly, you become the easy person. Inwardly, you become the person who no longer trusts your own spike of irritation. Every time your body reacts, you cross-examine yourself before you cross-examine the behavior. Maybe you are tired. Maybe you are rigid. Maybe this is what adults do. That self-interrogation is useful to them. It keeps the cost inside you while the convenience stays with them. You have probably lived the middle of this pattern without ever announcing it to yourself. You reread a message before sending it because your first version sounded too exact. You add a smile that your face does not feel. You say all good while your stomach drops. You offer a reason they can use against you, then feel strangely foolish when they use it. Nobody has to overpower you in that moment. You do most of the cleanup on their behalf. Your throat tightens, your hands go still, and some small private part of you realizes you are helping to make your own boundary disappear. That is the pivot people miss. The trap is no longer only in their behavior. It has entered your timing. You start arriving pre-softened. You prepare to cushion the next overrun before it happens. You write the gentler version in your head. You reduce your own clarity in advance so that the room never has to react to it. This is where tolerance stops being a virtue and becomes a training scar. Once somebody sees that you cushion impact for them, they begin to move with less care. Plans get made on top of your flexibility. Assumptions get built on top of your self-control. They stop treating your calm as a gift and start treating it as infrastructure. That is why the harm feels strangely invisible. Nothing is exploding. You are just carrying more weight than the scene admits. Watch how often the burden gets renamed as your identity. You are the patient one. You are the easy one. You are the person who understands. These labels sound flattering because they erase the transaction. If you are naturally patient, then nobody has to account for what your patience is covering. If you are naturally easy, then other people can stay clumsy without ever seeing themselves as costly. Identity language is a clean place to hide exploitation. The body will usually leak the truth anyway. Your jaw hardens on the walk home. Your breathing changes when a certain name appears on the screen. You start needing recovery time after simple plans. You feel relief, not joy, when something gets cancelled. Relief is one of the clearest signals in this entire pattern. It means your system was bracing for a cost that your mind kept calling manageable. Sometimes the pattern escalates through ambiguity instead of volume. The person never quite asks directly, they imply, they hover. They move toward your resources with the confidence of someone who expects the door to open. If you hesitate, they act mildly surprised, as if they were only floating a possibility. That mild surprise is strategic. It pressures you to manage their discomfort, which puts you right back in the old role. Now you are not only protecting your time. You are protecting them from the feeling of being refused. That is why tiny oversteps are never tiny in function. They are probes. Each one answers a private question. Will you name the change? Will you correct the assumption? Will you let the social temperature decide what happens to your limits? When the answer keeps being no, the person stops testing and starts building. Soon the schedule is not the real subject anymore. The real subject is authorship. Who gets to define what your capacity means? Who gets to decide whether your discomfort counts? Who gets to write the normal version of events after you already felt the distortion in your body? The most manipulative people do not always defeat your boundary head-on. They teach you to doubt the moment when it appears. You can see the difference immediately when someone healthy makes the same mistake. A healthy person notices the cost without needing a performance from you. They do not wait for your politeness to erase it. They account for the impact themselves. They correct early. They reduce future friction. They become more careful after contact with your limit, not less. Predatory tolerance trainers do the opposite. Contact with your limit makes them more ambitious because they are studying whether your limit can be dissolved by tone. The scene that exposes everything is usually embarrassingly ordinary. You are already dressed. You have already reorganized your evening. Another message lands with another soft change, another assumption, another casual overrun, and you feel that flash of heat that you have been calling impatience. But it is not impatience. It is recognition. It is the part of you that finally understands this is not about tonight. It is about a pattern in which your steadiness keeps being converted into somebody else's operating room. That recognition hurts because it forces a second admission. You were not only being used, you were being trained. Repetition did what force did not have to do. It taught your body that swallowing the first reaction was the price of keeping things smooth. So now even fairness can feel rude when it finally reaches your mouth. This is why people stay in the pattern too long. They wait for a dramatic event that would justify a dramatic response. But the actual mechanism feeds on sub-threshold theft. It survives on moments that are annoying, deniable, explainable, forgivable, and cumulative. 100 minor extractions can alter a life more quietly than one obvious betrayal. They can teach you to offer time, energy, and interpretive labor before anyone has earned clean access to them. There is another variation that hides inside gratitude. They make the overrun sound accidental and the apology sound intimate, almost confessional, so that your role quietly shifts from affected person to emotional caretaker. Now you are not just dealing with the inconvenience. You are managing the atmosphere around it. You reassure them. You reduce your own expression so they do not feel ashamed. You end up performing generosity at the exact moment when your own limit needed protection. A skilled extractor loves that sequence because it turns your standards into their comfort. You can watch this happen in your own language. Your sentence starts with the impact, then swerves into mercy before it finishes. I know you have a lot going on, I get it. It is okay, that may be true, it may even be compassionate. But if the compassion arrives before the fact is secured, the fact usually dies. Then the next interaction begins from a false record in which nothing costly happened at all. Some people build their entire social life on that false record. They do not think of themselves as people who take. They think of themselves as people surrounded by unusually understanding others. That story lets them keep a good self-image while moving through the world with expensive habits. They can remain casual because someone nearby is always converting impact into grace. The cost to you is more than time. It is perceptual damage. You stop trusting proportion. You know something felt off, but because the scene stayed polite, you downgrade your own reaction. Then when the pattern repeats, you arrive with less confidence in your read. This is one of the most efficient forms of control available to ordinary people. No threats, no speeches. Just enough minor distortion that your inner measuring system starts asking permission from the outer room. That is why chronic tolerance often creates delayed anger. You are not angry only about this time. You are angry because 10 older moments just got reclassified at once. The body suddenly understands that what looked like isolated inconveniences were actually connected permissions. One late arrival, one expanded favor, one soft override, one casual assumption. None looked decisive alone. Together they formed a corridor that led straight to your current exhaustion. There is also a status element hidden here. The person who trains your tolerance is often testing who gets to remain frictionless. Notice how rarely they absorb the same uncertainty they hand to you. Their emergencies are to be accommodated. Their delays are to be understood. Their discomfort is to be handled delicately. But your time is elastic. Your plans are revisable. Your reaction is to be moderated. That asymmetry is the whole story. One person is allowed to stay central while the other person is expected to stay adjustable. Once you see that asymmetry, old scenes become unbearable in a new way. You remember the gathering where everyone waited because one person always runs late and everyone called it just how they are. You remember the family member whose disorganization became an atmosphere that rearranged every holiday around them. You remember the friend who always needed understanding but treated your timing as background furniture. None of those scenes felt evil, they felt normal. That was the camouflage. The person with the loosest relationship to consequence became the person with the widest practical power, and power built that way almost never stays confined to time. It spreads into interpretation. The same person who assumes access will usually assume innocence too. If you object, they frame the objection as tone, stress, sensitivity, or a misunderstanding. The event itself gets buried under commentary about your delivery. This is another harvest. If they can move the conversation from behavior to your manner of naming it, they get a second chance to avoid contact with reality. You feel the damage when you start rehearsing not only what to say, but how not to sound. You try to make the correction painless, elegant, impossible to resist. You draft the sentence with enough cushioning that any reasonable person would accept it. Then the sentence still gets dodged, and for a second, you feel ridiculous for trying so hard just to defend something simple. That feeling matters. It means you have entered a dynamic where clarity is being taxed. A healthy dynamic does not tax clarity. It may require tact. It may require timing. But it does not make the basic act of naming impact feel like a moral risk. Whenever truth has to dress up as tenderness before it is allowed to enter the room, someone has gained too much control over the climate. This is why people who train tolerance often dislike clean details. Details pin behavior to the floor. We agreed on 6. You changed it at 6:15. I accepted one task, not 4. I said no to tonight, not maybe later. Clean detail removes the haze where the extractor usually lives, and haze is precious to them because haze keeps all consequences negotiable. You may have noticed that the strongest urge to blur detail appears right when you are closest to naming it. Your body goes warm. Your mind offers compromise before the other person even speaks. You hear a voice in yourself calling the exact sentence too sharp, but sharp is often just accurate without anesthesia. A lot of adults have been taught to mistake accuracy for aggression because accuracy ends arrangements that depended on vagueness. There is a brutal kind of loneliness in this pattern too. When you are the one who keeps absorbing, other people often experience the relationship as unusually smooth. Only you know how much quiet work is holding that smoothness in place. You are translating chaos into coherence. You are converting surprise into flexibility. You are trimming your own reaction so the scene can keep moving. Then, because that labor is invisible, nobody thinks to relieve you of it. They thank the atmosphere. They do not see the person bleeding underneath it. That invisibility can become addictive in a dark way. Part of you starts taking pride in being the stabilizer. You become the one who can handle it, the one who does not need much, the one who can take a weird change and make it work. There is genuine competence in that, but competence without boundaries gets drafted into service against the person who owns it. The skill becomes a trap because everyone around it learns they can spend it. So the real question is not whether you can be patient. You can. The question is whether your patience is staying under your authorship. Can you choose it, direct it, withdraw it, and name its cost? Or has it become an automatic subsidy that activates whenever someone else behaves carelessly enough? That distinction decides whether your calm is power or prey. A lot of viewers will recognize the same body sequence here. The notification appears and your shoulders lower instead of rise, not from peace, but from surrender. You already know there is going to be a change tucked inside a soft sentence. You already know you will have to decide whether to protect the fact or protect the mood. That exhaustion is not oversensitivity. It is the fatigue of repeated internal triage. You are doing the emotional emergency work that should have been done by the person creating the disruption. The pattern can even train your memory. Because every single incident seems minor, you struggle to hold the whole chain in mind. You can recall fragments, not the architecture. This is another reason manipulators prefer small oversteps. Small oversteps decay in conversation. They do not sound persuasive when reported one by one, but your body stores accumulation with terrible accuracy. That is why one seemingly tiny message can suddenly make you feel much more than the message appears to deserve. The body is not overreacting, it is summing. When that sum finally breaks into consciousness, many people rush to become even nicer. They sense the danger and try to solve it with extra grace. They become more accommodating, more explanatory, more forgiving, hoping the pattern will correct itself if they are generous enough. But generosity cannot repair a dynamic that survives by converting generosity into coverage. In that kind of system, your kindness is not medicine. It is insulation around the exploit. The correction is simple in form and hard in sensation. You keep the scene small and the fact heavy. You do not over-explain. You do not volunteer 12 reasons. You do not dilute the event into a weather report. You let the actual change stay attached to the actual person who made it. That is the entire reversal. The cost stops living anonymously in your body and starts living accurately in the interaction. This does not make you cold, it makes you legible. And legibility is dangerous only to people who are benefiting from blur. Something else changes when you stop cushioning. Your perception comes back online. You begin to see who rushes to repair and who rushes to reinterpret. You see who can tolerate your exact sentence and who needs your sentence translated into comfort before they can hear it. You see who respects limits because they are real and who respected them only when they were decorative. That information is worth more than the temporary harmony you lose, because harmony bought with self-erasure is not harmony. It is a quiet monopoly on consequence. If you have been living this pattern for years, do not expect the body to celebrate immediately. Clarity may feel unnatural at first. Your pulse may rise even when your words are clean. You may grieve the image of yourself as endlessly understanding. Let that image die. It was too useful to people who liked your tolerance more than they liked you. The final trap is moral vanity. You tell yourself that enduring all this proves depth, discipline, spiritual maturity. Sometimes it proves those things. More often it proves that you are strong enough to survive conditions you should have edited much earlier. Endurance is a magnificent skill. It becomes tragic when it is spent protecting arrangements that grow stronger by consuming it. The people who deserve your patience do not need it to erase the evidence. Wherever your restraint gets treated as free territory, the pattern is already bigger than the scene. They trained you to call self-betrayal maturity. Subscribe if you want to recognize the pattern while it is still pretending to be normal.